So let's plow on then. So let's just go straight in there and let's see a strategic case study exam. Now, during the day, what I'm going to be doing is switching between this mode that we're in now, which is where we've got the slides and you can see me some of the time, and then moving on to have a look at what's on my screen, and when I show you presentations and things like that, we'll do that. And we'll switch to screen sharing mode when I do that. I'm going to go into that now, so there'll always be maybe a 10-second pause while we go through that. So if you bear with me a moment, I'll just switch over and we'll move into that mode. Good. Okay, so what you can see in front of you then is the strategic case study practice exam. Now, I would advise you to take a look through this practice exam yourself in your own time. You can basically, if you haven't done this yet, if you type into Google Pearson VUE CIMA and then just go to that particular site, sign in, and then you can sign up for the practice exams. I suspect many of you have seen this already. If not, then it's very important that you look at this. But when you get into your exam, this is what you will see in front of you on the day of the exam. So okay, to start off with the starting off point, a bit of introduction to the exam, and then they will start to tell you about the different sections. In this particular case, there's 3 sections, and each of those sections is 60 minutes each. Now, do be a little bit careful here. Do you see where it says number of tasks? That will always be 1. Now, you need to watch out, because actually most of those tasks have subtasks, little subsections, and you need to identify each of those subsections and make sure you've answered each of them. So don't let that fool you, that number of tasks 1. There will probably be 2 or 3 separate things you have to do. Okay, so that's just a warning, but quite important we see there. Okay, we've got 60 minutes for each section. Okay. Then you start going into the exam itself, and what you start seeing in front of you is a scenario. Okay, so this was a company cast, and it sort of sets the scene. Okay, it starts off, you're a senior manager advising Judith. Now, that role as a senior manager is very important. What we find is that there is certain things required of your role, and that role is given to us by CIMA, so we know what is expected of you. And a little bit later on, I will talk to you about that. Okay, notice that you're reporting to Judith, the new group CEO, and that means that you're reporting to a very senior level. It means that this exam is the strategic case study, that it is a strategic-based analysis you will be doing, thinking long-term from the focus of the directors about the performance of the business over the next few years. So it's a very strategic focus. You need to think about who you're writing your reports to in the exam, and you will be writing some kind of report or email or something along those lines. Okay, and you need to write to those people in a way that's right for their particular level. Okay, so we've got a bit of an introduction here. I won't go through doing that. I'll just have a look at the other things that we've got available. You'll notice that the pre-scene information comes up if you click there. Now, in actual fact, in this particular one, because it was a case study, pre-scene was very small. This is just what would be. To be fair, they say it was an extract of pre-scene for this practice exam. They didn't really give us any more pre-scene materials for this practice exam. But the key is, as I'm sure you know, that you get the pre-scene given to you in advance. Our pre-scene this year, or for this sitting, is on a company called Slide. They're an oil company. And what's critical is that you've understood the strategic position of that business. And so we've got the information from the pre-scene, and you'll be able to see the full pre-scene on the day of the exam. Okay, so you'll be able to see what that is. If you go back to structure, the structure you might think is the business structure. It's not. It's telling you about the exam as a whole. So there shouldn't really be any reason for you to go back to that particular page. In fact, one thing that you will find that I advise during the day is that the pre-scene information, you've done all your analysis in advance, so you shouldn't really be looking back at that pre-scene information. on the day of the exam. Okay, you might have a quick flick, but to be honest with you, from a timing point of view, you haven't really got time. But it is there if you want it. If you want to see the information on the company because you forgot someone's name, maybe the CEO's name, or you wanted to look up a figure that was in the pre-scene, that's there and it's available. You'll notice that the discount factor tables are available here as well. It's highly unlikely you'll be using those in the exam, even though they are available. The reason being is that this exam does not have any calculations in it. If you do a calculation, it will be a quick kind of back of the envelope calculation to support your analysis. You won't be asked to do specific calculations. And CIMA have said that you can get just as many calculations just as many marks, even if you don't do calculations. And so therefore there is no necessity. But if you did feel you wanted to do some extra calculations in the exam, then that's fine. But it does make this a written-based exam, therefore, and hence the reason why writing skills and writing approach is so important. Okay, so I'm going to click on next then and see what the next situation is. So Judith is handing me a copy of some reference material and she's talking me through the task that she wants me to do. And then we go through to write your response, and then you have your section here where you get to write. The first thing to actually notice in a written section is the limited functionality of the box. So I can start typing in here. And the reality is that, well, what can we do with that? We can bold it, put it into italics, we can underline it, I can undo that underline, I can do a copy and paste, and that's basically it. Notice here, you can't do things like bullet points or numbering or anything else. So this is not a word processor. This system where you'll be doing your exam on the computer is very, very simple in nature. And just bear that in mind. I would advise that you come in and have a little play. I mean, there's not much else you can do, to be honest with you, besides what I've just shown you on the screen. But it's a very, very simple section. Now, once you get to that, what you can do is go back, if you click on reference materials, and see any of the information that we had earlier. So you can see there, that was the first page, the discussion with Judith. Here was the letter. And so they provide you with this reference material that's therefore there available. You can go back and check up on that. And then you're on screen there at the same time where you're writing your answer. What you'll also notice up in the top right-hand corner up here is you can see our time is already clicking down. We've already used, 6 minutes now of the time. And so the time starts clicking down as soon as you enter that task, and it goes right down to 0. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about more timing. I've got a section on time management towards the end of the day, but timing is a real challenge. It is tough to finish the exam effectively in the time, and therefore that can become an issue. Okay. So there are lots of warnings when you get onto a section of the exam, just to warn you about finishing the exam. Now, one thing to bear in mind before we start, it says, are you sure you want to end this session? Once I've ended this session, my time on this is over. That is it. It's finished. So although I've got 53 minutes left, I cannot come back to this section of the exam again. So don't think, look, I'll go on to part 2 and come back to this because I might have some more ideas then. That's not allowed. Okay, so are you sure you would like to end this session? Only answer when you are absolutely sure. You're absolutely convinced. Okay, so someone just said, can you copy from the pre-scene? Let's see if I can on this system here. Do you know, I've got a funny feeling that I can on this system. Let's just check. No, I can't copy from the pre-scene. So that's one of the things there that you can't do. Okay, so yeah, I'm just trying that out for you. No, that doesn't work. So just to answer your question, not being able to copy from the pre-scene in that particular case. So Okay. Okay, yeah, so my point was then, okay, we can't, I would advise you when it comes to your time to use all that time. Okay. One little exercise I often do with students when I'm doing live courses is if I see anyone finish early and they've got, say, 5 minutes left on a question and they're just sitting there doing nothing, I would often go up to them and say to them, look, why don't you just write a couple more paragraphs out? And what we'll do is we'll see whether you get any marks for it. And in, I would say, half of the cases, the extra points that they wrote when they thought they were completely finished actually did score some marks. And so even if you run out of time, just carry on and use all your time anyway. Put all of your points down. Okay. Okay. Okay, so let's actually end this section then. I will end it this time. Fine. And notice I'm immediately going on to the second section. So notice my time remaining is already clicking down, and here I am, and I've got an email in front of me here. And you'll notice that the information in here is much the same. They're asking me the task that I'm going to be doing. Okay, let's actually have a little bit of a look of it now. What have we got here? So it's to do with shares being placed on a quotation, and they want to look at the suitability of each of the main 4 valuation methods for our purposes. Okay, and notice that there is an attachment, so I better look at the attachment of this, and in that attachment they're actually giving me some information on valuations, the valuation approaches, asset-based valuation there, earnings-based valuation, dividend, which is quite nice of them, to be fair, because the reality is that you could be quite easily expected to know all of the different valuation approaches without actually having been given some guidance on them. So that was quite kind. So do look out for the reference material. It may well be, there's our pre-scene and our structure, so those are the other reference materials, but make sure you don't miss on all the things that you can click in the exam, because obviously there's some key, very helpful information for you. Okay, so if I just click next, and then I click on reference materials again, notice my email then can come up in reference materials, my attachment then can be in there as well. So notice how you can see the various different information. Also notice while we're in there, just how practical this is. The idea of the exam is that you are working through maybe a week, maybe a month, in a practical situation where you are being given email, much like this one from your CEO, or you're going into meetings and you are being given tasks based on this real world scenario. Act as if you are in the business, working for Judith. You know Judith, she's a friend of yours probably because you work closely together, maybe. Highly likely because you work just underneath the board of directors. And you need to be approaching Judith in a very friendly but very professional, business-like way. So, I mean, that one there is the 22nd of May notice on the actual date. I'll be interested to see what the next date is on the next one. So it's very much a practical-based exam, which, here we go, type that in. It's very much a practical exam, trying to recreate what it would be like to work for, in your case, Slide, this oil company. And you have to bear that in mind from the point of view of Slide. You need to know the company from the pre-scene as if you were working in that company. If I can spell it right. There we go. Okay, so imagine you're at work working just underneath your board of directors. Well, this is the position you need to be. You need to know the company, its strengths, its weaknesses. You need to know about the oil industry generally, of which there's information in the pre-scene, and that will therefore help you provide good, solid, logical advice at a strategic level. Ultimately, this exam and your assessment will be based on how good your advice is. If you are near the pass mark, what happens? your script goes to the examiner. Basically, there's a whole team of markers who mark your script. If you're really clear, then you will be passed. If you're really bad, then you will be failed. But if you're near the pass mark, your script will be reviewed by the examiner. And I remember back when, back on the old T4 case study, just before the strategic case study at this level, I wrote the learning system with the examiner at the time, and remember talking to her about the way that she did those reviews. And the long and short of it was, when she was doing those reviews, she was very much basing her final assessment on how good that the analysis was of the issues, and in particular how good the recommendations were on that. And for her, recommendations really were key. In a sense, how logical were they? Would they take the business forward in a logical way? Would real directors of an oil company look at this report and think, yeah, that's good, solid, logical report, that I would take that advice? If they look at it and start thinking, no, they're way off track here, this just looks like some student in an exam that really knows nothing about the oil industry, they know nothing about these models that they're supposed to be telling me about, you will be failed. And so that's very, very key then. It's a very practical exam, very good analysis, very good recommendations, very practical in the way that you answer, focused on the business is what's key to passing. Okay, so we'll leave that section as well then. And we go on to the last one. Notice the timing is already coming down already, and so on. And we go through and straight into our answer there. And I think that should mean that we are at the end of the exam. So I have to say, I think I finished that exam very quickly, although I wouldn't have scored any marks, of course. But so you could actually sit there and go through an exam in about a minute if you wanted to. Obviously, that's not going to get you very far through to passing. Okay. So I'm just ending that exam just there. Let's just return ourselves back to the slide view mode. If you just bear with me while I just get the slides back up. So as you can see, a very practical exam, very much based on you talking to your directors, writing them emails, reports, memos, doing presentations for them in a very simple format, all online. Okay, let's answer the questions that have come in so far. You can ask questions if you want to as well. Okay. So, okay, Marta says, are there any breaks between the sessions? I don't believe so, Marta. Certainly on that sample they've given us, there's no breaks between sessions. It immediately goes on to the next session. So you do have to, you've got 3 hours and you're going to be using those 3 hours in one based sitting. Okay. Carla says, what is near the pass mark for this exam? Okay, the pass mark for the exam is 60%. So it certainly used to be the case on the old T4 exam. The examiner told me that she would look at anything from 55% up to 60%. Or actually, back then it was 45 to 50 because the pass mark's higher now. So it was anything from anything within 5 marks of the pass mark that she would look at to do her review to help decide. So, I mean, rest assured, if you were near the pass mark, that your script has had a real thorough double check by the examiner themselves. You know, that's an important point. Also, watch out that although it's 60%, your mark you will get will be out of 80. This is going to be really, sorry, out of 150. So it's going to be really odd. And the pass mark is a strange 80 out of 150, which isn't 60% at all. So there's this very odd system that CIMA have, that some of you have just taken the exam and potentially failed. If you're listening to us today, then you'll probably understand that. So let me tell you about these 5 variants in the exam. So in the week of the exam, running through from Tuesday through to Saturday, people will sit 5 different variations of an exam. And those different variations will happen at completely random spaces. So likelihood is that you will be sitting next to someone next to you at your Pearson View Centre, and you will be sitting a completely different exam from the person that is that is sitting next to you. So there'll be 5 different exams. And of course, the reason CIMA have done this is that because the exams are over 5 days, there would be a lot of potential for a lot of cheating if there was just one exam. By having 5, it reduced the likelihood and ability for people to share the questions and therefore to cheat. Okay. One key with this then is that in order to make it fair, those variants are moderated. And so they take your script and what would typically be a 60% pass mark, and they look at the easy exams and the more difficult exams. And basically the more difficult exams, they put everyone's gradings up. And the easier exams, they bring everyone's gradings down. And so you may think that you're doing really badly on an exam, but you could have a particularly tough exam. And when they look at everyone that sat that exam, they then put all the gradings up in order to make it fair between all the different versions. Of course, alternatively, you might think you've got an easy exam that went really well, but everyone else found that one easy too, and therefore you were shifted down. And so the key then is you must do the best you can on the day of the exam. That's absolutely crucial, is that even if you think you've got a really hard script, don't worry too much, just plow on in there, keeping going and keeping getting the best that you can do in every section, because it may well be that your script is put up. So just to answer the question then, you will get given a mark, and the pass mark is 80 out of 150. Okay, and that will be what you get on the day of the exam, but that's a variant, that's a moderated score. The actual exam itself is marked out of 100, and the pass mark is 60%, if you understand what I mean. So it's only the moderated score, which they go away and they do their statistics on it, and you get this 80 out of 150. So it's a funny system that they have there. But the idea is to make it fair between the 5 different variants. Okay. Good. So, yeah, those are the variants. Let's have a look at the competencies. So basically you are graded on 5 different competencies, and the marks are split out at 25% of each. They can vary very slightly. We saw with one of the pilot papers they had very, very slight differences depending on each particular exam. But the long and short of it is that there's 4 categories, and you have to answer a script that will score marks under each of these 4 categories. In actual fact, you have to get a minimum of around about, CIMA are being a little bit cagey with it, but around about 30% of the marks under each of those categories. So, that's roughly about, about 8 to 10 marks in each of those categories out of 25 in order to pass each of those categories. So you have to do a reasonable amount in each of them, not a huge amount, and then you have to get 60% overall from the general assessment in order to pass. Okay, so let's have a look at those 4 categories then and see what they involve. First of the categories is technical. This is bringing up theory that you've learnt. That's your E3 theory. You might bring up different models like the 5 forces or Mendelow's or Pestel analysis, Ansough's matrix. You might bring up some risk analysis or some risk strategy or something about foreign exchange in P3, or in F3 you might talk about funding and financing. You might do MPV calculations, although actually MPV's very much now in P3 actually. I still think back to the old syllabus when MPVs were very much F3 actually in the past. Okay. If you do any minor calculations, they will get graded under the technical side. If you use any theory from E's, from the E2, sorry, from the managerial level, E2, F2, P2, or the operational level, E1, F1, P1, that's all good for technical marks as well. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with knowing all of that earlier theory and using that theory. One that people often like to use is motivation theories, for instance. I had someone tell me recently, after the exam just gone, they wish they'd gone back and reviewed their motivation theories before the exam, because they'd have found that really useful to comment on staffing issues that there were in the case study. Okay, you won't necessarily, in fact, it's probably unlikely you'll actually be told which theory to use. So it's about you bringing the theory up and using that on the day of the exam as much as you can, and then scoring that minimum number of marks in that section. Okay, but that's basically the technical side of things. Next is 25% on business acumen, where you're applying that theory, you're applying it to the unseen and the pre-seen information. Basically, in our case, you're showing you know about the oil industry, you know about the particular strategic position of this company because you've analysed the pre-seen. If there's new information given you into the unseen, you've applied there. And you've basically done some detailed analysis. You've answered the why, you've answered the how, you've given some detail. You've not just given the theory, let's say it was Porter's 5 forces, you've not just explained what supplier power is, you've said well, how that applies to this company in this situation and what the position of that business is. That's business acumen. The next is people-based skills. So people-based skills is about showing you've thought about the situation from the various different stakeholders that are involved. And so you might think about how something affects the staff or suppliers or customers or directors and any other stakeholders that might be of relevance, shareholders, for instance. You might consider cultural issues, the culture in the business. Remember, the culture is, according to Handy, the way we do things around here. And so you might look at the business culture and how that needs to change or whether it's appropriate given the situation. You might look at ethics and the rights and wrongs from an ethical point of view, or what's right or wrong from a CSR or corporate social responsibility. Do we owe a duty of care, for instance, those environmental issues, perhaps, that might be in a particular instance. Finally, you're communicating well at the level of the people that you're communicating to. In this case, it's senior managers. And so people skills then, very, very key into to doing well. Finally, we've got leadership. Leadership is primarily for your recommendations. So notice then that you must make recommendations even if you're not told to do so. In the section we saw earlier on, those sample case studies, the pilot paper, they didn't specifically ask for recommendations. You are expected to do them anyway. Nice, clear, bold, logical, focused recommendations is what's required in order to pass. So very important. Okay, the recommendations must follow on through. Remember the story I told you earlier about the examiner and what they look for if you're close to the pass mark? Recommendations was the thing that the examiner of the T4 exam used to say was really key to her. If they were the good, she would pass the exam. That was really important to her. And she always couldn't understand why people didn't spend more time on their recommendations. But I think the fact was that she'd never really told anyone how important they were. And I went through a process of trying to communicate this actually to the world, because no one really up to that point had really recognized that that was the case. I do believe the strategic case study is similar enough that recommendations will be just as important. And we can see that with the fact it's 25% of the marks. I mean, it really is hugely important. Okay. The other element that comes under leadership is change management issues. Remember Lewin's models and things like that. Have you considered change issues, resistance to change? And that will come under leadership as well. Also make sure that it's a strategic focus, it's motivational, you're motivating the directors to think this is a good idea or a bad idea, that they will actually act on the recommendations that you're making. That's the key for motivation. So your script then needs to balance these 4 areas. Primarily, you need to be specifically answering the requirement that's asked, but you also need to think more broadly about these 4 areas and make sure that each of these 4, as far as possible, is answered as part of each of the elements of your exam. Finally, there's 8 to 10 what they call integration marks. And the integration marks are the quality of your script as a whole. How logical is it? How good quality, the presentation, and it's also, have you integrated the ideas from E3, F3 and P3? So you might think a particular question is very E3 focused. Maybe it's asking you about strategic analysis, but perhaps you can bring up funding as part of that for F3. Perhaps you could bring up what the risks are in that as part of P3. And so if you've combined those well, you've also integrated. So it's about 2 things, your script as a whole and how good it is and how well presented it is. And secondly, it's about your combining the different elements from the different sections of the theory. And do that well and you'll get those integration marks. What I should also say with integration is that those were the marks the examiner used to tell me that she used to use back on the old exam, to put people up or down. If she feels a script isn't that good, she'll knock down the integration marks. And if she feels it's a passing script, she'll put a lot of integration marks to get it up over the 60%. So it's the kind of flexible marks for the examiner and the marker, depending on their gut feel on your script. So notice gut feel comes into this. It's not a purely scientific exercise. It's, if I was a director reading this, would I feel that this was a good script? Good. So, categories then. Let's just answer any questions on categories before I give you a little quiz. Okay, let's see what's come up. Okay, so Assad says, so would they expect us to score 60% in each of these categories? No, it's 30%. Well, look, they've said about 30%. Okay, they're being, CIMA are a little bit cagey about exactly what that is. And I think it's because of the variance, because it might be a slightly different percent for each variant, depending on how easy people found each variant. So, but it's roughly 30% in each category. Okay, it's 60% overall. But basically, I mean, if you do reasonably well on all of them, you should easily get 30% on all of them. If you've passed the whole lot, you know, you shouldn't be doing that. Or I know a few people in the last exam, they didn't. They did do that. So as in, they did get over the 60% or the 80 out of 150, as they call it, but they did fail. So you must remember to get balance. Balance really is critical. Okay, Marta's asked me to remind of the names of the motivation theories. Yeah, Marta, Hertzberg's motivation theory, the hygiene theory. Okay, that one's a good one, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a good one as well. Those are the two motivational ones. Personally, I like Hertzberg the most because it's very much it's easiest to apply in an exam. You have your forward motivational elements, and you have your backward looking what demotivate people hygiene elements. It's very, very easy to apply to the exams and to case studies in particular. So those two in particular are very useful to you, Marta. Maslow is the most famous one, of course, so you can't go wrong if you use Maslow either. But well worth your time. A quick 10-minute review of those theories, well worth your time. Of course, you can always go back and sign up for our free E1 notes. It's also in our E2 notes as well. So if you won't get the access to those, of course, just by being on the strategic case study, but just sign up for our free areas on those earlier papers if you want to see any of the earlier notes, because we've got free notes available for everyone that signs up onto those areas. So you can see the motivational theories there. E1 is the place I'd go. Okay, Mehdi says, on each task, will the examiner focus on a specific paper, or he/she would expect us to bring in each task all the strategic papers connected with each other? Okay, basically most of the questions are focused on one area, but it will go down well if you bring in the other. So for instance, let's say it was a primarily E3 question, but you brought in some funding and some risk from F3 and P3, that would be excellent, and you would get some high integration marks for that. But most of the question will be E3. Okay. HS from Singapore says, is there a need to include a short paragraph for conclusion? Okay. What I would say, HS, is that given the fact that leadership is 25%, a short paragraph is not enough. A long paragraph for a conclusion, where you give your conclusion, you justify that, you give action points. That's the best way to go. So no, you really do need to do a really strong recommendation. So not just short paragraphs, long paragraphs, HS, really detailed. Otherwise you won't get your leadership skills marks, basically. Okay, Johnny's asked me to quickly go back over the business acumen. Business acumen, Johnny, is about applying the theory. So for instance, let's say I had a question on Porter's 5 forces. I just described supplier power, and I'd said the supplier power is about the power of the suppliers over the people in the industry. That's very much getting me my technical mark. The question though is that, can I apply that to the scenario? So can I say, well, actually in this industry, supplier power is particularly low because we have a lot of competition amongst suppliers, or something like that. So that would be application to the pre-scene. Or maybe there was a hint in the unseen about a particular supplier and they're charging a very high price because they are a monopoly. Well, then you could say, well, for this particular type of service, there's a monopoly position, which means that they're able to charge high prices. Their supply power is very high. So you're analysing the theory, you're analysing it in relation to the case, you're giving advice and guidance and thought. That's where your business acumen comes in. So basically you need to give the theory, you need to apply that theory to the scenario as best you can, you need to consider the impacts on people, then you need to make recommendations. And you need to do that throughout each of your 4 or 3 tasks. Pretty typically, it is 3 tasks in the strategic case study. It could go up to 4, but no more than 4 is what we've been told. But expect 3. That's the expectation. Okay, that's Johnny's question. Stephen says, must you name the theory or just apply it? Yeah, I would name the theory. The reason being is that you want to get as many technical marks, not just name the theory, but explain the theory as well, so that you're definitely getting those technical marks. Remember, it's 25% technical marks. If you just said it's Porter's 5 forces and then you went on, you wouldn't really be getting very many technical marks. You might get 1 or 2 that way. But no, you must explain the theory and then under technical and then apply the theory under business acumen. Okay, so Satish is asking, I achieved technical strong. Okay, so what that means, Satish, is that you did an excellent technical section. You analysed it using good technical skills. Business moderate, so you did some analysis. People failed. So that suggests to me, Satish, in your exam, that what you didn't do is for every issue, you didn't consider the stakeholders. You didn't think who the people were and how the people would be affected. Perhaps you didn't consider ethical issues for every issue as well. And so maybe your CSR wasn't considered. You didn't consider environmental issues or the culture of the business. So that would be where you failed on the people shield. Moderate means a pass, but not a great pass, okay, on the leadership side of things. Okay, so that would be basically how you did, Satish, in your exam just taken. Satish, let me just ask you, you can type it in. Did you actually try during the exam to concentrate on who all the stakeholders were? For every particular question you were asking, did you actually say, yeah, no, let me think, just let me take a step aside. Who are the stakeholders here? What's the impact on those stakeholders? What's the ethical issues that might be relevant in this case? Okay, so I'll just give you a moment to answer that one, Satish. It'd be interesting to hear your answer. Okay, Lucia said, I failed on people too. Score mark was only 60. Lucia, you can answer the same question actually. Did you do that for every requirement? That could be where you were failing down. Okay, Stephen says he was moderate on all of them but failed. Yeah, you do need to have, the people I've seen pass tend to have one of them that's particularly strong. Remember, you only need 30%-ish to get a moderate. And so you could in theory be moderate on all of them and still be way below the pass mark. Okay. Okay, Carla thinks she didn't get integration skills. Okay, Gattis got 83 and failed on ethics. Oh, Gattis, goodness me. So you can see the scenario here, which is Gattis actually passed the exam, looking at the exam as a whole. If Gattis had been taking the old T4 exam, he would have just been passed. But on this new criteria that CIMA have said, where you need this minimum 30% on each, then Gattis would have been basically cut down on that. He said he failed on ethics. What he means is he failed on the people side. Remember, Gattis, it's not just about ethics. It's actually also about stakeholders and people and social responsibility. So do you remember those other things as well? Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. Susanna was in the same area. Okay. Satish said, I answered to the requirement. I did not realize I needed to think of people skills all the way through. Okay, that's a shame, Satish, okay? But you know now. So hopefully what that's going to mean is that this next time round, because actually now that's mean not just where you answer the requirement, which is very, very important, of course, you will also be able to pick up extra marks for considering these areas. So that will also get your total mark up as well, which you'll find probably will make the difference. Okay, oh goodness me, I can't believe David, 101, but failed on leadership. David, did you give recommendations? I'm interested to hear. What were you doing? Did you give nice clear recommendations at the end of your section? Did you consider change management issues? I'll be really interested to hear what you felt went down. Goodness me. So actually, David, to be honest with you, what's incredible is 101 is the highest mark I've heard of anyone getting, anyone that's passed, which is really remarkable. Actually, you must be absolutely shocked and frustrated. Anyway, I'll answer the question. I'd be interested to know, David, how did you think you did on the leadership? Did you actually make clear recommendations at the end of each of your answers? Okay, so we'll wait for David's answer if he cares to share it with us. Okay, then. So, which category then is a little quiz I've got for you as we come to the end of this section. What I'm going to show on screen for you then is going to be a short section from an answer. Okay, and what I want you to do is to say which of our 4 categories does this come into. And I'm going to run a poll. You don't need to use the chat box on this one. So here is the first one here then. And if you bear with me when I set each of these polls up, it takes me a short period of time. Have a read of that particular requirement there. Okay, and then answer the question, which category do you think that is in? Okay, so we've got, what have we got here? 88% of people. We're gradually getting a few more votes in as people read it. Most people here going for leadership, up in the 84%. One or maybe one, one technical, one analysis, a couple of people state case skills. Okay, let's take a look at that one then. So the question itself is looking at the balance of the factors considered above. I believe our best approach is to outsource the manufacture to ABC. That is a clear recommendation, and the majority were quite right then that is a leadership skills area. I believe our best approach now, so we are actually recommending to outsource the manufacture, actually even to a specific provider. Okay then, so have a read through the next one then. If we were to outsource this to ABC Limited, there is likely to be a need for redundancies. It is important we consider our duty of care to staff. Okay, so have a think about that. Think of the 4 categories, and then you can get yourself voting. Okay, we've got a big preference here for the people-based skills, and absolutely I would agree. Notice that what we are actually talking about here is duty of care to staff. That's very much ethics. Even then, the fact that there's redundancies and the words the staff is in there. Staff are people, they're a key stakeholder. That's very much people skills marks that we'd be getting our marks there for. Okay, in Mendelow's matrix, staff are in the keep informed box, meaning they have low power but high interest. And as such, we have a duty to update them with all information about our decision. Okay then, so this one's a little bit more challenging. They do get a little bit more challenging as we go through them. Okay, so where would you say on this particular one then that you think that one should be? Okay, yeah, we have got a little bit more of a mix in there on this particular one. So we've got around 60% of people saying technical, 20% of people, 20% people, others analysis. Okay, so the first thing on this one, which is probably why most people went for technical, is of course it talks about Mendelow's matrix and the keep informed box. There's a definite focus here on theory, and so probably I'd mostly agree with most people and say that it's technical. The fact that we've actually gone on and have applied it, saying in this case they're low interest and high, so low power and high interest, is a little bit of analysis. The person that said that wouldn't be wrong as such. Okay. And then saying we have a duty to update them about all our information on the decision. I'm not sure that's quite enough of a recommendation. It's almost a recommendation, but not quite enough for it to be leadership. It's primarily, and I put that one there as a technical point, it's probably what you do in your analysis section rather than your recommendation section. Okay. Okay, so here's the next one then. Importers via forces model. Supplier power represents the power held by suppliers over the competitors. When it is high, the profitability of the industry is reduced. Okay, so I'll again get you to just to have a quick vote on that one. Here we go. You can start voting now. Okay, so we have got, a little bit of analysis, just one person. Everyone else is in there on technical, and absolutely that one is completely technical. That's using a model and it's explaining a model. Okay, in actual fact, there is no analysis in that particular one. It's not applied to the scenario in any way. Okay, let's have a look at the next one then. In this case, we have a lot of bidders for this contract, suggesting the supplier power is low and we'll be able to negotiate a low price and gain a good profit margin. Okay, so where do you think that one might come? You can start voting now. Okay, so we're starting to get a big preference here for the analysis section. Just one person going for leadership and one person going for people-based skills. So I would agree with you, absolutely. This is primarily applying this to the scenario. So in effect, this would make a good couple of paragraphs. Your first paragraph would say, look, here is the theory, and I'm going to explain the theory. Then I'm going to move on and apply that theory to this particular case. Okay, there isn't actually a recommendation in there, so I certainly wouldn't say it was leadership. People maybe, but no, it's primarily application, so therefore that is analysis. Here's another one then. I advise that our legal department and supply team work closely with the supplier over the next few weeks to ensure clear service level agreement is drawn up with clear targets with penalties if these are not hit. Okay, so let's take a quick look then, see what you think that one is. Possibly harder than some of the other ones that we've had, although I don't think you're finding it very hard, really. We've got one person on people, but I agree primarily then that this is a leadership skills issue. So, yeah, we are making a specific recommendation. Now, in actual fact, this is what I would call an action point. And I'm going to teach you an approach to doing your recommendations, to get detailed recommendations. And the approach will be as follows. It will be you'll start off by making the clear recommendation. Then you'll move on to justify that, say why you're doing it. And then you'll move on to some quite detailed action points, a bit like the one that's on the screen there. And to get really high leadership skills, Mark, so David, this one might be particularly good for you, is you really need to focus on these three elements and actually go on and give detail. Look, next we need to do this and we need to do that. And that will be about going into the detail of the kind of point that we've got on the screen there. Okay, another one then. So treatment of staff at the supplier is important, and we have an ethical duty of care to them to ensure good working conditions. Okay, so off you go. We have a 100% view on people skills in this particular case then, which I would absolutely agree with. Okay, it's very much people skills. It's about ethics, treatment of staff. Ethics comes under people. Okay, how many more of these? This is our last one. Okay, so our lack of internal expertise in this area is an important reason why the expertise of outsourcers would be specifically suitable to, or in this case, to us in this case, might be the way it should say. So this one's a little bit tougher. Let's see what you think on this one. Oh, you don't want to see that one there. I've given you the wrong poll. let me do that one again. Apologies for that one. Okay, so let's put the poll back up. Here we go. There you are. Which of the four categories is this one? A little bit harder just to finish off. Okay, so we've got primarily people coming in on analysis, where we've got 25 people, 26 people so far, a few people going in on leadership, 14% of people. So the question is are we analysing a point, or are we actually making a final conclusion, thinking about change management potentially? Okay. Now, there's an element of saying it could be in our recommendation, saying we would outsource would be specifically suitable. So I can understand that people went for leadership, but to be fair, I put this one in that as a point of analysis. Very much we are applying it to the scenario in our case, our lack of internal expertise in this area. And so therefore, that one I'd thought of there. But it could be in a recommendation section, to be fair, that one as well. So what I'm hoping then is that in looking at those things, that's given you an idea of the different elements and the type of comments. Now, did you notice if we were going through, all of those were related to a specific type of question, which was to do with outsourcers. And you notice how that outsourcing question, what I've managed to do is I've managed to get all the different categories into that same question. And therefore, that's the best way to answer, is to bring all of those in as you go through. Good. So let's take a look then at any other questions that you may have as we bring this first section to an end. Okay, so let's take a look here. So, okay, so David said, I think that leaving the recommendations to the end, I ran out of time to provide enough quality. Okay, so it sounds as if you did do recommendations, but perhaps you just rushed them, right, and you maybe did them very, very briefly at the end. So that's probably what it was then. So you're right, the quality of recommendation is true. The recommendation needs to be something that flows on from the earlier sections, and so therefore, that really is crucial. Okay. Okay, Lucia is giving a bit of advice to David, and I would agree with it actually. Lucia says, you can afford to spend more time on recommendations next time with such a great mark. I would agree with that. It's a nice comment, Lucia. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Martha says, I guess you would score greatly on integration as well. This was a comment to Nick. Yes, you would actually. If you've got, the problem is you tend to get poorer integration marks if you did less good recommendations. So I don't know how David did on that. Probably not badly given the 71. Okay. Satish said, can you tell me the marking system, please? Satish, it's 25% in each of the criteria. Typically what happens is that as the marker is going through, they basically mark for each point that you're making and give you marks as they go through, and they will then judge which of those marks goes into the different criteria. And so you've got an overall mark, but then it's split down by your 4 criteria. So that's the way that they mark. We will cover that later. We've got a big section on marking later on. So we'll, how do you pass? Well, we'll kind of cover that in more detail then. Ask me then if you have any more questions, Satish. Okay, so look, I'm going to go a quick section now, how to pass the SCS exam. To be fair, as we've been going through, I've covered many of these issues that we've already done. So I'll be reasonably brief on this one then. Let's take a quick look at the presentation then on this particular one. So bear with me a moment while I just switch over to the screen sharing mode and just draw up my quick presentation then on what do you need to do to pass. Okay, so first thing you need to have then, as you've seen, is you need strong technical skills. The technical skills give you your 25% of technical marks, and so you do need to know the theory. However, you mustn't spend all your time revising theory for this exam. I heard a lot of people who failed the exam just gone who said, I spent all my time going theory. And in fact, some college, one in particular, quite a famous one, all they did was teach people theory, which Of course, theory is the base point, but it's only a starting point. What you must do from that theory is go on and use that theory to the business, apply the people skills, apply the recommendations at the end. Okay, it is 25% of your marks. Next key element of passing this exam then is your writing and your communication skills. You must be able to get your point over. Getting your point over is critical to doing well, in that you make a point, you have to explain that point in detail and explain that point in depth. And it's that detail and depth and writing in the right way. I have seen many excellent students who fall down on the writing skills side of things. Okay. You must explain your points fully and in detail. Explaining your points fully means you take your point, you say why, you say how it applies to the scenario. And we'll cover that in a lot more detail later on. You have to be clear and coherent in what you're writing so you get your point across and write at the right level for the examiner. Okay. Just going to make that full screen so you can see that one a little bit bigger and a little bit brighter. Okay. Next, you need to produce a balanced script. And as we saw from the criteria, there are 4 criteria and you need to be balanced across all those 4 criteria. Otherwise, simply you won't have passed in each of them. Of course, the other benefit is that the more you do in each of those, the greater your skills will be and the greater your overall mark will be. And so that's important as well, is getting all of those marks from each of those criteria. Next element of passing this exam is to know the pre-scene well. And what we're going to do next week is we're going to work through the analysis. Now, I'm hoping that many of you will have seen my pre-scene video analysis and already worked through the pre-scene video analysis. But next week's masterclass, we will do a review of the key points coming out of that. What we'll also do is a review of some of the theory as well. It's going to be a mixture between applying to the pre-scene and doing the theory. You also need to know the industry, so that therefore the more you know about the oil industry, the better your position will be, because you'll basically be able to look at each question and think, well, what is suitable given the typical industry that we're in? Of course, we do have our industry pack, which you can read through, which applies a lot of key elements of the industry to the slide case study, and that should help you to understand the industry as well. Next, you need to identify the requirements. So identifying the requirements means that as you go through, you need to pick out the text, what the requirements are. There are typically 2 or 3 requirements for each section. If you miss one of those sub-requirements and you only answer one part rather than the other, it's going to be very hard for you to pass. And what we'll do during the planning section of this question is we will focus on how you go about identifying those requirements. But that's really critical. You mustn't miss those. And I've known some people in the mock exams that we did for the class sitting where they did, particularly on early stages, they didn't read the requirements carefully enough. They missed it and they were failing by a long way in those early stages. You must complete your whole script. We just saw David actually say that he got to the recommendations but probably didn't do enough quality or detail on those recommendations. And it does show that that complete script, getting to the end of every section, is really, really critical. So that's the next key. Managing your time well is going to come into that. Next key to passing this exam is planning. And so what we'll do in a later section is I'll show you how to do an effective plan. But the plan will get you the structure of your answer. The plan will get you the key points you're going to start raising, and it will also help you understand the requirement effectively as well. So planning, crucial to passing. Next element is managing your time. Again, we saw from David, he said he didn't quite get to the end and do enough detail on recommendations. It really is a very time-pressured exam. We need to read the information, identify the requirements, you need to plan it, you need to write your answer, complete the different subsections. And so there's a lot to do within a short time within each section. And so therefore, being very, very quick, planning your time well, really crucial. And we've got a session later on where I will talk you through how to about planning your and managing your time. Finally, the most important thing is to practice, practice, practice as much as you can, as many mocks as you can, doing the mocks once, doing them again if you've got the time to do though. It's a tough exam. The mocks really are key. And when you do this, do time yourself. We were getting a lot of people at the early stages last time just taking way, way too much time on their first mocks. They weren't doing them to time. And of course, the problem is that you're not learning the lesson about time management. And time management is a key lesson to learn. It's probably as important, time management, as knowing theory, okay? Because it's about producing the balanced script in the time. Okay, so those are my views of what it takes to pass. And actually, a lot of what we're going to be covering for the rest of the day is going to help us to master that area. Okay, so let's just go back then to our main presentation then, and we'll answer any more questions that have come in since then. Okay, so first point I've got for you then, while I'm asking any questions that have just come in, have we got anyone retaking? Obviously we have, because we've had a few people commenting already that they're doing retakes. And my question for you is, in a sense, to help the people that are doing this for the first time. You've gone through the process of studying for one of these exams and sitting one yourself. And so therefore, what was the key challenge? If there was one key challenge that you faced, one key thing that you would have, what was that? What's your key challenge for those people that are starting this for the first time? Put it in the chat box then, and we'll talk about some of those points. So when I've shared with you what I think is key, but what do you think? And what's your lessons from having taken this? And basically any other advice that you would give people if you were going down that route? Okay, so you put that in and I'll start to answer some of the questions that have come in. Okay, so Tu Hugen Hai, I don't know how to say your name, from Vietnam of all places. Fantastic to have someone from Vietnam on the line. Okay, says each question have to get 4 skills, or it's separately in 4 question. Okay, I not get good sound again. Okay, now I understand that, particularly internationally, I can understand that as well. I would say about the sound, if you do struggle with sound, it's a big problem. Just watch the recording back, and then you can watch that back in your own time. It's probably going to be less of an issue at that particular point. But to answer your question, the 4 skills, you can get them within the same question, much like I did with that outsourcing question where I got all my four skills in. That would be the best thing that you can do, okay, is try and get them within the 4 questions. You don't have to get everything in every one, to be fair, but to try on every one would be ideal. Okay. So Lucia said, I found the questions to be quite vague. I was not sure how to answer them. Okay, that's an interesting one, Lucia. Okay, be interesting to see as you start practicing more questions this time round whether you can start to understand. I think that the key to finding the questions vague is to spend quite a lot of time in the planning phase, really working out exactly what they're asking. You can actually, one quick way to practice things like that is just to practice lots and lots of questions. One thing you can do, of course, now is to go back and look at each of the 5 variants on the last exam and just go through practicing as if you were going to look at, well, what are the requirements on there? What are they specifically asking me for? And you can go through each of those as a little exercise. Go through all 5 variants, just focusing specifically on the requirement. You can then take a look at the examiner's answers to check what the examiner actually answered, to check that you're on course. So that's good. But the key to that is in the planning phase, to take the time over the plan and to really structure your report well. Okay, Davinia said time management. Okay, so yep, time management always a key problem. There's certain people that struggle with time management and answering enough in the time and working quickly enough. Okay, Teresa said same as Lucia. Okay, which is the difficulty in very broad requirements. Carla found the same. Okay, difficult to choose theory to build an answer. Yeah, I can understand that. And I think one of my frustrations a little bit with some of the examiner's answers, if you do take a look at them, by the way, is that they don't seem to use the theory hardly at all, which is quite frustrating when we know that you have to use theory in order to get the theory marks. And so it's difficult, you know, even when they don't even do that in their answers. Hopefully what you'll see with the Stranti solutions as you work through those is we always do bring theory in, even when you're not told which theory to use. We try and bring it in as much as we can throughout our solutions. And you'll see us trying to reference various different theories. And again, in the planning phase, one of the keys is to think during the planning phase, well, what theory could I bring in? And there's some theories actually you can bring into questions again and again and again, things like Mendelow's matrix, Porter's 5 forces. You can bring lots of those into almost anyone. So we'll talk about that a lot. We'll particularly talk about that on the Masterclass 3, where we do a lot of focus on these extra little marks that you can get. Okay, Simba was the planning, the theory, and the application. Well, most things then, Simba. AD was time management. Alison was time management, although they're talking about T4. I think it was particularly difficult, the time management in T4. Okay. Susanna found the requirement quite vague. Yeah, it's one of the difficulties of the strategic case study is that they are trying to create these vague requirements because they're trying to say, well, look, in work, you wouldn't be given a highly specific one. And so when it's very vague, you've got to kind of try and work out what they want. What I would say is that if you do get a vague requirement, do be bold, clear, and decisive. Just decide what you think that they want, what you would give your boss if that were they sent you that same email, and just get on with it. One thing I do find sometimes is people can waste a lot of time trying to decide and trying to think about it. And you just got to get on, structure your answer, and start writing. So at least you get lots of points down. Ronan says only moderate technical and analysis failed people and leadership. Okay. Satish says was getting the structure right. Well, we'll talk about structure a little bit later on, Satish. Okay. Anna didn't think that she wrote enough. Okay, not knowing if she wrote enough. No, basically, the more you write, the better, Anna, is the long and short of it. Although CIMA say if you need to type at 20 words a minute, that should be enough to pass. The reality is that if you've got some more, if you write faster than that and get a longer answer, there's just more marks to give, so it's easier to pass. Okay. Anna's about, different Anna this time, from Bristol, is about writing to get points across. So clear, focused writing. Shan is about controlling nerves. Oh, that's always a difficult one. Shan, controlling your nerves. You know, all I can say is what I always used to do about nerves was I used to think that when I got into the exam, I couldn't do any more revision. I'd done all the hard work. Let's just get on and show what I know. But I know some people do have nerves. It's always very difficult. Understanding the requirement again from Sean. David was time management. Sabina was stressed. Okay, now that is really hard, so you couldn't focus. So again, the exam stress, of course, does come in here. Another thing actually for Sean and Sabina is when you're doing your mock exams, always do them as if it was a real exam situation, so that you kind of set it up yourself. You do them in 3 hours, you do them on the online system that we've got for you, and pretend like it's an exam situation, because it's never like the real exam, I know, but it's always helpful if you've been in that similar sort of situation in the past. Okay. Gattis said the best thing he did was doing all 5 mocks. Okay. Lucia did the mocks but didn't pass them. But I do think it is very important to do the mocks. Susanna was weak on technical. Okay, which surprised her. Yeah. Okay, Teresa said Masterclass 2 was a great help. Well, hopefully it'll be a great help for everyone again this time round. Okay. Assad says, I don't get why the questions shouldn't be specific. I'm working with the CEO. They always make sure they clearly explain what they require. The I have to say, personally, I think that what the balance that they get is about okay, to tell you that, Assad. It's clear enough what you're actually being required to do that you should be able to answer the question. It's not like they're just giving you a scenario and say, there you go, get on and tell me what you think about that. They do give you a bit more detail on that. So what CIMA are trying to do is they're trying to get across that they're trying to say it's not as clear cut as it was back at the operational case study level, where you are given, do you remember when you used to do your old management level exams, and if you did the strategic exams in E3, F3, P3 as written questions, you had highly focused questions. And they're trying to say, well, look, the real world, they just tend to send emails without, they don't use requirement words like discuss or evaluate and things like that. So they're trying to get away from those specific requirement words. Okay. What else have we got here? Okay, and there's just some general points there. Cara also found the third masterclass useful, so hopefully we will get that through as well. Of course, those of you that failed last time round, please do ask away again and again today. Any questions you have, the more you ask, the better it is for everyone, of course.